guys, and welcome back to another video of Decoding the Antichrist and the End Times. So this will be part 3. I have not gone ahead and read to where I'm going to stop, so I'm going to just do my best to keep it under a half hour, and wherever we end up is where we end up. So I'm going to grab a drink to get myself started here, and we will get rolling. So this is Chapter 2, and it's entitled The Jewish View of the End Times. Since I have traveled around the world to speak in other nations, as well as all over the United States, people ask me why the Jews don't believe in Jesus as their Savior. So let's start by looking at what the Jewish expectations of the Messiah are. And then we will look at their views of the anti-Messiah. Many religious Jews believe we are currently at the threshold of the coming of their Messiah. In January 2011, I invited Rabbi Chaim Richman of the Temple Institute to speak to my congregation about plans for rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem. I still have all the blueprints from his presentation. You can go to the Temple Institute website to view updated blueprints and an incredible video that provides details concerning the structure. The Institute has completed all the preparations and is now only waiting for the political will of the Israeli government to proceed. You might have heard of Rabbi Yehuda Glick, who is currently the face of the temple movement. He was almost assassinated in terrorist attacks several years ago, but by the grace of God, he survived. He currently has a seat in the Knesset with the Likud party. Again, I apologize because I'm probably butchering all of this. The way that it's spelled is Knesset with the Likud party. So look that up. I had a chance to visit with him on one of our ministry's annual tours to Israel. In fact, our group to Israel that year was literally a part of prophecy being fulfilled. Wow. I hope he expands on that. I have to stop here a second and explain how at El Shaddai Ministries in Tacoma, Washington are so different from most congregations in the world. El Shaddai Ministries in Tacoma, Washington. Remember I said that my Aunt Lisa, who sent me this book, is a Messianic Jew in Washington? This is her. The El Shaddai Ministries in Tacoma is where she goes. So she actually knows Pastor Mark Biltz. So crazy cool stuff, and I'm super excited to be reading about it. So let me continue on here. If you were to visit one of our services, you would find over 30 languages could be spoken. We have people from so many nations attending every week for fellowship that we are like a miniature United Nations right in Tacoma. Or I prefer to say a little taste of heaven right here locally. Because we also live stream our services, we typically have over 300 cities from over 30 nations watching. Because of this, we have people from many nations joining us on our tours to Israel. We all meet up at the hotel when we arrive, and we feel an instant connection to one another. On our trip in the spring of 2018, we were invited to the Knesset, Israel's equivalent of the U.S. Capitol, where Knesset member Yehuda Glick, Rabbi Tuli Weiss, other Israelis, and our bus tour members from many nations had a Bible study together. Now look at these verses from the book of Micah. So the first one is Micah 4, 1 and 2. But in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow unto it. And many nations shall come and say, Come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, and to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths, for the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of God from Jerusalem. We went away in awe, realizing this prophecy from Micah was coming alive right before our eyes. Rebuilding the temple is very much part of the coming of the Messiah in the redemption process for many Jews. There is a controversy, though, as to who will build the temple. When you read Zechariah chapter 6, it seems to imply that the Messiah will build the temple. But many believe that, regardless of the controversy, until Messiah comes and rebuilds the temple, there is nothing wrong with their building one to fulfill the commandment, and Messiah can build his whenever he gets here. By the way, one of Messiah's names in Zechariah 6 is the branch. He will be both a priest and a king. While many within Israel oppose or give no credibility at all to the temple movement or the attempts at building the third temple on the Temple Mount, all the preparations are still going full speed ahead. The Jewish view on the end times has to be one of the most shocking realizations that came to me over the last 25 years. As I began studying Jews' way of thinking, while I was raised in a household that wasn't prejudiced toward any ethnic or minority group, there were still stereotypes that carried over based on never having any actual relationships with other ethnic groups. I found out at an early age that in order to learn anything, we must be humble. When we think we already know it, we are truly blind. It is also imperative to see events through others' eyes because it helps us to round out our own perspective. People from different cultures who witness an event often have different perspectives of what happened. While I believe 100% that Jesus is the Messiah and he was the physical manifestation of God on earth, I want to share with you what I have learned from Orthodox Jews about their perspective of the end times and their reasons for not believing in Jesus as their Messiah. Since we are talking about the Jewish Messiah in this section, I want to transition now into using the name Yeshua rather than Jesus, because that was his real name. We all know his mother didn't speak English 2,000 years ago in the Middle East. The letter J didn't exist in either the Hebrew or the Greek language, and it didn't even exist in the English language until around 400 years ago. As a matter of fact, in the original King James Version of 1611, the Messiah's name wasn't spelled Jesus with a J, but Jesus with an I, so it's I-E-S-U-S. My point, though, is not to say there is anything wrong with the English name Jesus Christ, as it is perfect for those who speak English. In other countries, it is different. He is known as Ihu Karate in the Maori language. And again, I apologize because I'm more than likely going to butcher these because they're not English. Jezi Kiri in Haitian. Oh, Lord. Sis Masiks in Somalian, and Isoa Masai in Tajik language. So when we say there is no other name under heaven by which we must be saved, we can't assume everyone has to know the modern English name in order to be saved. The English name we use isn't even a correct translation, but is actually an English transliteration of a Greek mistransliteration of his actual Hebrew name, Yeshua. Consequently, we lose the original meaning of his name being salvation. I just want to bring back the authenticity of the scriptures and help shed light on why the vast majority of Jews don't believe in the Christian Jesus. Do you remember the story of Joseph being sold into slavery in Egypt? Toward the end of the story, Joseph's brothers went to Egypt and came face to face with him, but didn't recognize him. Why not? It was because he looked and acted Egyptian. They were shocked when they found out he was actually their brother. Guess what? The Egyptians were also shocked because they thought Joseph was Egyptian. In Genesis 41:45, we find that Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath Panay, which has been translated in different ways, but Jewish sources say it means revealer of secrets. Now, before I continue, in other videos in the story, I have 3 parts out. I actually am going over a lot of what he is talking about. So, I just went through the story of Abraham and Sarah and their children, and up next is Joseph and his brothers. So that will be part 4 in the story, which will expand more on that whole story. So if you're new, if you don't know the story of Joseph, that is okay, because on another video, I am going through the Bible as one continuous story. So this is the other one that I'm going through. So if you are unfamiliar with it or you need a refresher, pop on over to those and I will read that to you. Okay. Joseph is considered a type of Christ. There are many similarities between them, but the point I'm making here is that, like Joseph, Yeshua has been given a non-Jewish name, Jesus. I believe the time is coming when most Jews and Christians will be shocked to find out Jesus is actually Yeshua. Several years ago, my wife and I were talking to an elderly German friend who was a child living in Germany at the time of World War II. In our conversation, we mentioned that Jesus was Jewish, and she could hardly believe it. When I encounter people who are surprised by this, I jokingly like to point out that they didn't speak English in the Middle East 2,000 years ago. Jesus' mother, Mary, would have called him Yeshua, which actually means salvation. So she was telling everyone to come and meet salvation. Names are so important. Amen. More than just end-time theology, my focus in this chapter is on who the Messiah is and what his nature and character are like. If we don't have that right, it won't matter what our doctrine is. Even Satan acknowledges God exists and is quite aware of the hard facts. So begin. Let's look at what Jewish people believe concerning their Messiah and their version of messianic times. So this next section is called the Jewish Articles of Faith. For starters, I need to introduce you to some of the Jews considered to be one of the greatest rabbis of all time. Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, commonly referred to as Maimonides or Rambam, was born in Spain in 1135 and died in Egypt in the year 1204. He wrote what is known as the 13 Principles of Jewish Faith, the basic philosophical, theological, and legal concepts of Judaism, comparable to what Christians call the Apostles' Creed. Within these 13 principles are 2 I want to highlight. Number 1, there is an essential belief within Judaism in the resurrection of the dead. Number 2, there is a fundamental belief in the arrival of a Messiah and a messianic era. As a matter of fact, the prayers prayed by most religious Jews 3 times every day confirming this belief. So just to reiterate, concerning end-time events, the Jews definitely believe in the coming of a Messiah who will usher in world peace, and they definitely believe in the resurrection of the dead. Here are the 13 principles. Number 1, belief in the existence of the Creator, who is perfect in every manner of existence and is the primary cause of all that exists. Number 2, the belief in God's absolute and unparalleled unity. Number 3, the belief that God doesn't have a physical body, nor will he be affected by any physical occurrences such as movement, rest, or dwelling. Number 4, the belief in God's eternity. Number 5, the imperative to worship God exclusively and no foreign false gods. 6, the belief that God communicates with man through prophecy. Yes. Speaking of prophecy, that will be my next video right after this one. I have one video up on my Prophecies Concealed Now Revealed book. So if you're interested in prophecy, hop on over to that video after this. The belief in the primacy of the prophecy of Moses, our teacher. The belief in the divine origin of the Torah. The belief in the immutability of the Torah. The belief in God's omniscience and providence. 11. The belief in divine reward and retribution. 12. The belief in the arrival of the Messiah and the Messianic era. And lastly, 13. The belief in the resurrection of the dead. Maimonides also wrote a work known as the Mishneh Torah sometime between the years 1170 and 1180, outlining all Jewish observances that were to be followed. In the section on the laws concerning kings, in the 11th chapter, he states that the Messianic king will accomplish some very specific tasks. First, he will build the temple, and then he will gather all the dispersed people of Israel. This will be followed by a reinstitution of the law of the Torah, including the sacrificial system, sabbatical years, and jubilee years. Obviously, the king would have to be a descendant of King David. If he also fights the battles of God successfully, then he may be assumed to be the Mashiach, also known as the Messiah. With this basic understanding, I now want to go a little more in depth with you as we examine the scriptures they use for their proof texts. To properly understand the scriptures, you have to look at them through the eyes of those whom they were written, the Jews, and see them in the context of their culture, language, and customs. You cannot even correctly understand New Testament writings without understanding this concept. It is so incredible to read the Bible with an understanding of the culture and context of what was happening in Israel 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. All right, one more drink. Okay, moving on to the next section. Defining the word Messiah. The foundation of communicating with anyone about what you believe is the defining of your terms. Just trying to see how much we have in chapter 3. Okay, so that's quite a bit. All right. The meaning of your words can build a bridge or create a roadblock. The same word can have different meanings to different people within the same culture, let alone people from another country. For example, the word football means soccer in Europe and most of the world, but not the United States. Words can also change meanings over the year with the same culture. For example, at one time, being gay meant being happy. So to begin, I need to define the word Messiah. This word comes from the Hebrew word Mashiach, which means anointed. Christos is the Greek translation of the Hebrew word Mashiach, which in English becomes the word Messiah. In the Greek language, Christos meant anointed, and this is where the English word Christ comes from. Contrary to popular belief, Christ was not Jesus' last name. When you say the name Jesus Christ, you are actually saying Jesus the Messiah or Jesus the Anointed One. In Judaism, a Messiah would be someone who is anointed. In the scriptures, we find 3 different groups of people who were anointed. Prophets, 1 Kings 19:16, priests, Exodus 28:41, and Israel's kings, 1 Samuel 15:1. While priests and kings could also be prophets, a priest could not be a king, and neither could a king be a priest. At least until the Messiah comes. Within Judaism, it is taught there are at least 2 main messiahs. One would be a suffering servant, and the other would be a conquering king. This comes from trying to reconcile two verses, one from the book of Zechariah that implies the messianic king would come humbly riding on a donkey, and the other from the book of Daniel where it implies King Messiah would come in power riding on the clouds of heaven. The Jewish people are looking for a benevolent king, Messiah, who will rule over all the nations of the world, not just Israel. He will fulfill the biblical promises to David, such as never lacking a son to sit on his throne, ruling from Jerusalem. In Psalm 89:35 through 37, God swears by his own holiness that he will not lie to David, that his seed will endure forever, and that like the sun and moon, his throne will be established forever. According to Jewish theology, the King Messiah will be a human, not God himself, and definitely not a human deity. The Messiah that God is sending to Israel will deliver them from their enemies and obey all of God's commands. He will teach the Torah or instructions to every nation. This is why during the Messiah's reign, the entire earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. It is believed the Messiah will be the ultimate king of Israel. He will not fail in his role the way all their past kings did, because he will faithfully follow all God's laws. Since the Messiah will be the king of Israel, he must follow all the biblical commands and accomplish the required tasks to be considered a kosher king of the Jews. In Deuteronomy 17, we read that Israel's king had to be Jewish. The Israelites could not have a foreigner ruling over them. The king could not multiply horses, wives, silver or gold to himself. He was to write his own personal copy of the Torah and carry it with him every day of his life, so he would be able to learn all of God's statutes and faithfully keep all the words of the Torah. This was so that his heart would not be lifted up by the common people, and he would not end up thinking he was better than everyone else. He was never to think of himself as being above the law or the Torah. Wouldn't it be nice if all our political leaders felt they were never above the law? Just think about the Biden family for a moment. Mull it over in your mind, because they operate as though they are above the law, and they're proving to be right, so that kind of sucks. In Deuteronomy chapter 7, we also find that the king was not to make covenants with foreign nations, including marrying foreign wives. He was to tear down all the pagan altars and idols, because the Jews were to be a holy people living in a holy land. From around the 2nd century BC through the 2nd century AD, there was an apocalyptic fervor among the Jewish people. After the temple was destroyed, many believed, based on Daniel's prophecy, that Rome was about to be destroyed. Many would-be messiahs were springing up. The Jewish people have historically believed several rising stars to be their ultimate messiah, but all of them have come and gone. Two very significant ones were Simon bar Kokhba from the 2nd century and Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson of the last century. While there were Jews who did not believe in the claims that Simon made of himself, Rabbi Schneerson always rejected the messianic claims that were made about him. He died in 1994, and to this day there are still some members of the Chabad, an Orthodox Jewish Hasidic movement, who believe he will one day be resurrected and become the Messiah. So the next section, which will probably be the last section for this video, the question is, how many messiahs are there? For the most part, Jewish eschatology embraces two main messiahs coming at approximately the same time. One would be a suffering servant known as the Messiah, son of Joseph, and the other would be a conquering king known as the Messiah, son of David. It is believed that the Messiah, son of Joseph, will come first and be killed in the war against the nations when the Lord destroys all those who are coming against Jerusalem. Then the Messiah, son of David, will arise and reign over the world from Jerusalem, where his throne will be established forever. Let's take a closer look at each one. So that is a perfect place to leave off. In the next video, we will learn about Messiah, the son of Joseph, and also the Messiah, son of David. And of course, we will continue on in this chapter and a few of the sections in this upcoming part of the chapter. When will the Messiah arrive? First century expectations of the Messiah, as well as biblical requirements for King Messiah. And then, let's see. I think that's it. Oh, and then a look at the sacrifices. The next one is, according to Judaism, Jesus never fulfilled the biblical criteria. The Jewish anti-Messiah. The Jewish concept of the two witnesses. So on and so forth. There's quite a bit. So, stay tuned. I'll be doing more videos on this. I hope that you're enjoying them so far. I'm enjoying reading them and learning them. There wasn't a whole lot for me to say for this one because I'm still learning, so I don't really have a lot of commentary on it. So, I hope that you're also learning. I hope you're enjoying these videos. Leave a comment down below if there's more that you want to learn. If you have any questions, please let me know. I do have Pastor Mark Biltz email, so if you have questions and I don't have an answer, I can reach out to him. I also will be reaching out to him through an email to let him know that I'm actually doing these videos. So hopefully he'll watch them and comment, maybe give some more insight. So thank you for tuning in. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that I get to share with you. I hope that you're enjoying this. Like, subscribe, turn on that notification bell so you know when part 4 comes out. And I will see you in the next video. God bless.